They win. Hello, everybody. I'm Riki Stamps, Director of Programs and Events, and I would like to welcome you to another resident interview. The difference today is we have 5 lovely guests, and I'm very happy to introduce to you Susan Moore Rieff, Marolyn Croft Fields, Gaye Warren Cypert, Earlene Brown Henry, and Fay Marie Stafford Johnson. Ladies, welcome. It's so wonderful to have you here today. When I first had the idea to interview ladies from Springdale, I had 2 or 3 in mind because I've worked at Butterfield so long, I knew people like Earlene that were from Springdale. And so I thought, well, I'll do a couple of ladies. Then it turned into 3, then it turned into 5, and because of social distancing, I pretty much had to stop it at 5. But I have since learned there are several residents, men and women, who live at Butterfield Trail Village who grew up in Springdale. This specific group, in first group, were born in Springdale, and that's why I wanted to start out with you ladies. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. And today what I would like to do is give a little bit of history for the audience and those who aren't from Northwest Arkansas particularly, about the history of Springdale, which is so interesting. Many years ago, as far back as the early 1800s, the area became settled as the Cherokees kind of moved out, and the Quapaw for a community called Shiloh. And I know many of us know the name Shiloh because of the amazing Shiloh Museum in Springdale. They have preserved some wonderful photographs and stories about this community over the decades. And some people wonder, why did it go from Shiloh to Springdale? Well, in my research, the name was changed when they petitioned for a post office and took the name Springdale because of Spring Creek that actually still runs right through downtown Emma. And the city's been working on that. It's a beautiful area with trails and new restaurants, so it's awesome that that's growing. So many people have learned or have always known there are billionaires that have sprung up out of Springdale over many decades. People that did not have a full college education, but they did very hard work and actually just grew Springdale to what it is today, and it is a worldwide known city because of its contributions to agriculture, transportation, retail, which is synonymous with Springdale. And the wonderful thing about these business people that have done so much over the decades have donated billions of dollars to Northwest Arkansas. And I'm sure we all understand their contribution, and everyone in Northwest Arkansas has reaped the benefits from their work. But along with these people, before they made their millions and billions, there were regular families. There were people who made this area their home. And I was talking with Fay Marie, and she loves calling Springdale the perfect picture American town when she was growing up. And there's so many small towns in Arkansas that have that hometown feel of love thy neighbor and their family, and life's based around church and school. And I love talking with these ladies and finding out all of their stories. So we're going to go ahead right now, and I'd like to start with Earlene Brown Henry. Earlene, yes. You have been in Springdale for your whole life until you moved to Butterfield.
That's right.
And so why don't you go ahead and start telling us, take us back to your parents and when they came to live in Springdale area.
Well, my parents my father was born out between Lowell and Cave Springs. So when they married, they came by horse and buggy to a small farm on Carley Road, and they were raising apples and chickens. And my dad got interested in the chickens, and he decided to get an electric incubator. Well, we had the electric incubator in the living room, and I was born in the bedroom. So, but my dad only had an 8th grade education. So I'm kind of proud of the fact that he has been recognized as the father of the poultry industry. So, because once he got through with the incubator, he moved into Springdale and called it the Springdale Electric Hatchery. So it's been a lot of fun. And when I was a toddler, a rooster got hold of me. And
Oh, I bet that was scary.
that was really scary. But anyway, been a great life.
And that incubator business is located on Emma. The structure still stands, correct?
That what now?
The building is still on Emma.
Yes, it's the Tysons were very nice when they remodeled. They left the Springdale Hatchery and has the name up on the top. Yes.
That's awesome, awesome. Well, Gaye, tell us about your early years, your parents, and living in Springdale.
Well, my parents moved from Fayetteville to Springdale in 1938, and we had a little house, probably a rent house, I don't remember, on Spring Street. My daddy had a dry cleaning business at that time. So I grew up there, and then we moved 3 or 4 times before I got to high school, actually. But and speaking of Earlene and the poultry industry, her dad really was the father, but so many more after that. And they have been so generous with the community and the area and really the whole state. It was one time it was said that Springdale had more millionaires per capita than any town in Arkansas. And it was known as the Main Street of Northwest Arkansas because of all the business that was going on there. But Spring Street was an interesting little, it was just right off of Emma Avenue, the name of the main street there. And one of my best memories is a little park, which is called the City Park, and it had a gazebo in the middle, a white kind of lattice gazebo, where bands would play sometimes on Saturday night. So everybody got a blanket and came to the park and sat on the grass and listened to the band. And it was the site of the annual Easter egg hunt for all the children in town. That was fun. I definitely remember that. But yeah, it was a good place to grow up. It was great.
Well, and you're speaking about Main Street. In reading a book that I would suggest some of you try to check out, I know they sell it on Amazon. It's called Springdale, The Courage of Shiloh, written by Velda Brotherton, and none of us know who she is, but it's a really good historical account from the early days of Shiloh. Mm-hmm. But I've always wondered, I've lived here 35 years, I've always wondered why Springdale didn't have a square.
Yeah.
I love squares.
I love squares too, and I don't know.
And I found out.
Well, tell us.
There was a square on Main Street, and the Holcomb gentleman who was encouraging businesses to build around the square. And then there was, I'm sorry, I don't remember, it was a particular railroad line, and they wanted to come through Northwest Arkansas, and Fayetteville was bidding for them to stop there. And then Springdale said, no, we want them to stop in Springdale. So they just kept talking. Well, the railroad line decided to stop in both cities, but because of, I can't remember if it was because of the spring itself, they moved further away. And so businesses started moving closer to where the railroad was stopping in Springdale, and the square businesses moved down to the main street, or which is now called Emma. There is a main street, but
yes,
that's why there's businesses lined up that led right straight to the railroad instead of the square. So
that railroad was very important to the industries there, the apples and all of the agriculture.
And yes, I think that the people back in the day realized how important the railroad would be to the agricultural industry. I saw a picture of horse and buggies who were taking steel beams to build the bridge, a local bridge over the river, just to help with the train and everything as they were building it. It was quite interesting. So Fay Marie,
Yes.
Tell us a little bit of your parents and your young childhood years.
All right. I always felt fortunate to have lived in Springdale because I think we talked the other day, it's kind of the Norman Rockwell type of town. My grandparents settled here early on, and Holcomb Street is named after one of my relatives. And Pleasant, my grandfather was John Pleasant Stafford. Pleasant Street was named after him. My grandfather bought the Springdale News when he was 18, and he published that. After he died, his son Raymond took over. After he died, another son took over, and then it went to the Sanders family. But we've always been real community-minded. My dad was in the First National Bank. That was his lifetime job. He was very concerned about the community. He was on the bank board. He was on the school board for years, and he was the chairman of the building committee that built the Methodist Church.
And that is a beautiful church,
And
beautiful.
now that's what they call the chapel now, but it was our sanctuary. But you're right, we were very much around school and church. And then in church, talk about church, Riki, on Sundays, we would go to Sunday school, then we would go to the 11 o'clock church, then we would go back to church that night, and then we would go on Wednesday night either for choir practice or prayer meeting. But it was very much a church-centered community.
And so many of the activities for young people,
Yes.
were their activities, absolutely.
Yes, they have a women's group, and then they have a young group of teenagers. So it's very important in our community.
Susan, tell us about your parents and early years.
My dad was killed at the end of World War II, and I was 3, my sister was 7. So my mother, who was made out of something I'm not, borrowed money, I'm sure, built us a little house, one house behind Emma Avenue and 1 block from Highway 71. So we were in a great location. We didn't have a car, so my mother had to walk to work. She started working for Swepco, which was downtown on Emma, about in the middle of town. And so she could walk to work, we could walk to school, we could walk to church, to the movie, whatever. Before the war, before my dad went in the service, he and my uncle owned Penrod's Cafe.
Oh, boy, I've heard that
which-
name a lot.
Which was the hangout.
Yeah.
And evidently the football coach was drafted before my dad. Since my dad was older and had a family, he didn't go into the war until the last year. But he volunteered and coached the high school football team. One of the people he coached was Sonny Henson, who later played for the Razorbacks.
Ah.
Yeah. Anyway.
He did a good job.
Anyway, then when he went into the war, he was on a ship that delivered the atom bomb, and then on the return, the Japanese torpedoed the ship, and he was killed.
Well, we are just honored that he gave his life for our country
Yeah.
and all the small towns in America.
Right.
You were telling me, Susan, about a memorial that you attended a little program.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Gerald Hart kind of ramrodded that at the old school building, which is now it was the 6th grade building when I was going to school, and it's now an administration, I think. Anyway, they honored people who had graduated from Springdale High School and were killed in any war, and there's a monument there, my dad's name's on it.
What an honor. I know your family goes there often. That's
I think
amazing.
we've all seen it anyway, yeah.
Well, interesting, you and Marolyn are 1 year apart in school, but you hung out with her older sister, was that right?
Correct. Uh-huh.
And what was her name?
Carolyn.
Carolyn. Well, did you feel like you were the stepchild that had to stay home when they were hanging out, Marolyn? Tell us.
Didn't ever enter my mind. No, my mother grew up in around Cave Springs. You may have to help me here. Cave Springs, Lowell, Spring Creek. She calls Spring Creek home. So she was, born and raised here. My dad was born in Kansas, and I hate to say that I don't know when his family moved to Northwest Arkansas, but his father was either the postmaster or the associate postmaster, assistant or whatever of the post office here, where the chamber building is now. And of course, they went through school together and married, I think, right after their senior year. And I have 3 siblings, older sister Carolyn. My mother, she had a friend, Neva Buchanan, that they grew up together, and both of them had girls, and they named their first girls Mabel Carolyn and Nancy Carolyn, and then Marolyn, and then, we had the twin names, and then after Carolyn and I came the twins. So we have twin brothers, Bill and Bob. So, and we always lived close to schools, on the latter years on Emma, a couple of locations. My mother was always a stay-at-home mom. She made all of our clothes. And Daddy was an accountant, and he started out, before Steel, I don't know who, but he worked for Steel Canning Company, and then he ended his career at Jones Truck Line. So that's about it.
Well, that's a good history, and what I want to do is have each of you share with me your memories of school. And I think let's start with about the 5th, 6th grade, and just talk about what you were doing, what was going on, or maybe even into senior high school, and how things came together, your hangouts, and just tell us about school. You all attended Springdale High.
Yes.
Yes.
All of us did.
Yes.
And probably started school there too, all of us. Not kindergarten. There was actually a private kindergarten in Springdale, a lady named Ramona Price. So before I started school, I went to Ramona Price's kindergarten. Way decades before any kindergartens in public
Was that
schools.
Darylyn Dwayne's
Yeah.
mother?
And of course, Springdale High School was where the current administration building is on 71.
Not the high school I went to.
No,
But it was originally a college. It was built for a college.
yes.
Y'all remember that?
I don't remember the name of the
I
college.
don't remember it either, before it went to the schools.
Well, and we're fortunate that the city of Springdale decided to save that building
Yes.
and remodel it. It is an iconic, historic site now in Northwest Arkansas, and it's beautiful, beautiful
It's a
structured
beautiful
building.
building.
So if you have the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, you need to drive down College towards Springdale, and what street does it intersect with?
Johnson Street.
Johnson Street, and it'll be on your right-hand side. It's beautiful.
It's lovely
Beautiful
inside too.
school.
Well, that's where Fay Marie and I at least went to school, was Central School.
Right, there were
me
2
too.
schools, 2 elementary schools in Springdale. Central is the one you're talking about, and then across the track was Washington. And then from there, we would go to the high school for a junior, what would they now call junior high?
Central Junior High?
Yes, and there was a little bit of rivalry, but I don't think we ever played one another in elementary school. But,
We would walk at noon. We had to walk home for lunch and back. But I remember that also we had Helen Tyson's mother was the cook. And on Wednesdays, we had hamburgers, and it was wonderful.
Oh,
and
boy.
if we took a little bit of extra money on Wednesday, we got to buy an extra hamburger. That was a big deal.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
So, the 3 of you, did you attend what grades in that particular building?
When I was in the 6th grade, if you're talking about the administration building, it was a 6th grade for everyone in town. At that time, there were only 2 elementary schools, I think, Central and Lee. I think Washington had closed. Am I right, or have I forgotten?
No, I think you're right.
Okay. Anyway, all 6th graders in town went to that building. So much fun.
Well, moving on up to high school, I heard someone mention yak. Who wants to tell us about yak?
That was pre my time.
No, it was after.
After your time. Okay.
Yeah, Marilyn can tell you about
Well,
it.
that stands for the Youth Activity Center, and it was on Spring Street, and that's where we would get together on the weekends, and there was always a parent chaperone, and I just remember it being Jimmy Littrell's dad, whatever his name was. And, you know, they would play records and we would dance, you know, if you didn't have a date, you'd dance with a girl, it didn't matter, you know, and we just sort of hung out there, and I think it was open when you were around too.
Oh, yeah, yes. In
It was
fact-
just a fun place, good, nice, clean, fun.
Yeah, Sue Bain and I had a maybe 16th birthday party down there.
Oh,
Yeah, they did have
okay.
birthday parties. But before that, before you had Yak, we had what we called Teen Town during the time that I was in high school.
Yes.
It was called Teen Town, and it was at the Legion Hut, actually, on Spring Street. It's where Teen Town was. You know, run, chaperoned by parents, and there was a jukebox, of course, to play music, to dance, to a ping pong table. And it was a great place for like Saturday nights for the kids together. Yeah.
But before it was called Teen Town, it was called Alpha Club, and we met at the Legion Hut, and the dancing was wonderful.
But let me tell you about that. We needed sponsors for that because we would go down there after a football game on a Friday night or maybe on a Saturday night. Okay, the Baptist didn't want their young people to go, but our Methodist minister at the time was Ed Ketzel, and he was a chaperone at some of those parties. So we did get to have it, and it was fun.
Earlene, I don't mean to brag, but talk about the dancing. Jim and I won a jitterbug contest at the Yak one time.
Uh-oh.
Jitterbug winner, I
Yeah,
love it.
Jimmy and I jitterbug too. That was a thing back then, you know. Jitterbug. It's called swing dancing now. It's about the same thing.
About the same thing.
Yeah. And the Legion Hut is also where the junior, senior proms were held. You know, not school sponsored, parent sponsored at that time.
And is this Legion building on 71 Business?
No, it's on Spring Street and
Oh, I know.
Johnson.
Correct.
Kind of across from the city administration building. It's been there forever. We took tap dancing there. I remember that. As a
I
little
had Girl Scout meeting there.
Yeah, girls. It was kind of a meeting place.
And what we had was a jukebox. I don't know if young people today know what a jukebox is. And you put your money in and pick out a record, and they'd play that. That was our music.
Well, so many of you had dances, and this was going through high school. You were meeting at hangouts, having, you know, sodas downtown. Some of the places you mentioned, Penrod's, that later became Hitch and Post. Yes, I've heard a lot of people had visited those establishments. But then
But the drugstores is where you went after school for the Coke.
Yeah.
for the Coke,
In my era, yes.
Joyce's,
Yes.
yeah.
There were several drugstores. Let's talk a little bit about Emma Avenue in those days.
yes, let's do
It was a busy, busy place. Saturday nights, everything stayed open really late because people came in after work. There were 2 movie theaters. There were at least 2 drugstores with soda fountains, and maybe a third. There was Joyce's, Rexall, and Oglesby's,
Applegate's.
and Applegate's. Right. 2 banks, 2 grocery stores that I remember, including the original Harps was on Emma Avenue. And what else, girls? 2 department stores, a men's wear store and a ladies' store.
Well, you know, there was Licklighters, Crooms,
Wilson's,
Wilson's.
Clarkson's.
Oh,
Ryan's.
yeah,
Yeah,
Ryan.
Ryan's was later.
Later,
Yeah,
okay.
Okay.
But it-
Dwight's. Didn't you say Dwight's department
Dwight's was
store?
later out on
Was
the
later.
highway.
And then the Famous Hardware, you could buy everything from
Oh,
a
yeah.
lawnmower to fine china. They had everything, 3 stories, so you could just shop there and get anything you wanted. It was,
And I remember Delana's Beauty Shop, which
Oh, yeah.
was up above the
Yes.
drugstore.
At Applegate.
And we would get permanents, and, you know, it was one of those things where they brought the deal down and
oh, yeah.
curled
And
your hair.
an important place was the ice cream parlor. You all remember? A nickel, get
remember
your big
that.
ice cream
Yes,
cone.
I remember that.
Can't
All
remember the
on
name of
Emma.
it.
Yeah.
And even as a young child, 6 or 7, it was perfectly fine to walk downtown with a friend and go to the drugstore and get a
Oh, yeah.
something, you know, perfectly fine. And everybody pretty much lived close to town. I was within walking distance all the time, even through high school.
Well, and that's what I've also found is a common thread. You all lived close to school, you lived close to your churches in that area. And then
Yeah.
eventually, when the population grew, it just started, spreading out from that area.
When I was in high school and I graduated in '53, only 2 people in the whole high school had cars.
Wow.
Only 2. Parking lots were not a problem.
Drive-in movies were not very popular, were they?
And old families were fortunate to have one car. I mean,
Right.
now
Oh,
they
yeah.
have 2 and more, but they have one car. My daddy was a banker, and he would walk to work in the morning. We lived on Allen Street, and it was about 4 blocks from where he worked. Then he would walk back at noon to eat lunch. Then he would walk back to work after that. Then he would walk home. Therefore, he left the car with my mother. But everybody did a lot of walking.
Well, one reason during the war is because gas was rationed.
Yes.
And it was hard to get enough gas for 2 cars. Or to even, so I imagine all of our daddies did a lot of walking. Mine rode a bicycle to work every day, just to keep his van there to deliver clothes and not have to use the gas. And war bonds, remember all the schools, we had functions at the schools to raise money for war bonds? Not you all. You were
I
past-
don't remember, that's
They were
before my
younger.
time.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, we talked about the youth hangouts and all of that, and I guess we pretty much covered most of the eateries. But I remember one of you telling me about AQ Chicken
Right.
and
The drumstick.
the drumstick. Was it a drive-through or?
It was a drive-in. It's
Drive-in.
Sort of like the Sonic is today, where
The
you,
drumstick.
yeah, excuse me. Where you would drive up and order, like the Sonic, like when you're at the Sonic today. And they had the most delicious French fries. They used the chicken batter on the French fries, and it was so good.
I think they still do that at the AQ Chicken House.
And it was the same as AQ, wasn't it? Didn't Roy Ritter start the drumstick
Yes.
too?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was, that's where a lot of people went after games and, on the weekends and what have you. I don't know how long it was open, how many years.
I don't either.
It didn't last a
You know
really
what
long
AQ
time.
stands for? AQ? Arkansas Quality Chicken.
Arkansas Quality.
That's why it was named AQ.
Is your microphone
I
messed
just
up?
think, I just happened to think about Neil's Cafe, and it had, all these animals. And I remember when one of our daughters was about 2, there's this big bear that stood there, and she just went up and socked him right in the nose.
That was
But
great.
Neil's has been there a long time,
Yeah,
too.
It has.
And most people remember Heine's Steakhouse. That was a famous, wonderful place to eat for the whole area. Heine's Steakhouse.
When I moved to Northwest Arkansas in 1985, I think that was the year it burned down.
Probably.
Was he what descent was that family? Was that his first name or his last name?
First name, Heine Derich. I
Heine
think he was
Derich.
German.
German.
I think.
Okay. Well, I wish I'd had the opportunity to eat there because I heard it was so delicious.
I remember our rehearsal dinner when we got married in '56 was at Heine's.
Oh, my goodness.
Mine was too in '61. And then Heine had the coffee cup downtown.
The coffee cup.
Yeah.
Which was just a lunch and breakfast place. I think maybe they even closed in the afternoon. I don't think they were open at night.
And I understand you enjoyed a Woolworths. You had a Woolworths on Emma?
Woolworths was on Emma, but they didn't have I don't remember them having a counter.
Okay, all right. Well, I know they had
Just a
one.
5 and dime.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there was some.
Sells 5 and dime on the corner there of Hawcom and Emma. Yeah,
Yes.
that's where you bought all your toys for Christmas and school supplies. That was the place to get school
Oh,
supplies.
Fay Marie, you worked at the 5 and
I
dime.
worked at that 5 and
Did you?
dime.
I did too.
Did you?
Did you?
Yeah.
Miss Self.
The sales.
The owner was Miss Self. She was very nice to us. I was going to talk about, when you're talking about the places downtown, what we used to do as a family on Saturday night, we would get in the car and drive downtown and park and just watch people go by. I mean, that was our entertainment. The banks and all the stores stayed open on Sunday because the farmers needed to come into town to do their shopping that day. And it was just real fascinating to watch people. That's
Lots
a
of
big deal.
Lots of people.
It's fun to watch people.
That's what we did.
Now we go to the mall and watch people.
That is so true. Well, these are some wonderful places that we've mentioned, but something I believe all of you participated in or enjoyed as entertainment was the famous Rodeo of the Ozarks.
Of course.
And from what I understand, Rodeo of these Ozarks was established in 1944 during the war by Shorty Parsons. And there's a lot of tradition with this rodeo. It's a PRCA rodeo. My own daughter competed in PRCA rodeos, and they have always drawn large names in bull riders, ropers,
Barrel
racers, and steer wrestling. And so why don't we talk about the rodeo and your experiences growing up as a child with the rodeo in town? Fay Marie?
Well, I'm not really a rodeo type person, but I know that was a big deal for Springdale. They were very successful. They got a lot of cowboys from other rodeos because this rodeo of the Ozarks developed real well. And it was quite a boon for Springdale. Brought in a lot of people. And I'm sorry it had to be canceled.
It is canceled this year due to COVID, but
Yes.
I'm sure they'll be back in full force next year.
I bet so.
Earlene, do you have any particular memories about the rodeo?
Oh, I just remember those bullfights used to scare me to death. And I remember Pat Parsons always ran the barrels. You know, I remember her doing that. Yes.
I remember the parades. Every year, there was a parade on the 1st of July and the 4th of July. And that was a big deal to go watch the parades with floats. and
Absolutely.
Hundreds or thousands of horses and bands, and it was fun.
Marilyn, did you tell us about your experience with the rodeo?
Well, we lived on Emma Avenue during this time, about where the AT&T or Arvest banks are in that area on Emma. And we had relatives, the Becketts and the Rutherfords from Gentry and Cave Springs and Spring Creek and out in that area, and they all rode horses. So they would all be in the parade, and we would, of course, just put our blankets out on the front yard, and, you know, all the relatives would come, and Mother would always, she was a good cook, and she would always fry chicken, and we would have fried chicken, and she made homemade rolls, and we would do all, and homemade ice cream. So every July, I mean, probably all 4 days, especially on the parade days, you know, we would all get together and gather on the front lawn, and then Mother would, you know, was back in the kitchen cooking. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. And then I have a good friend, Sue Gladden, Canup now, who rode barrels, and we used to go out to her house and, you know, sort of watch her ride and what have you, and we always would go to the rodeo. And some of us would even, some of my high school friends, we would usher at the rodeo. You know, if people didn't know where they were going or whatever, we were sort of there to help. And it was just a lot of fun.
Susan?
Oh, I loved it. I don't know whether I thought the cowboys were cute or what, but I loved it. I went to every performance, I bet, for 4 or 5 years, afternoon and night. It'd be hotter than blue blazes in the afternoon, and you could freeze to death some nights. I mean, it was amazing. I had a few friends that always rode in the grand entry, and so it was just fun to be there.
The place to be.
Rodeo's the toughest sport on dirt, no doubt about it. And speaking of sports, I think that if I mention football, that automatically brings up some memories of a particular rival that was nearby. And so to establish these beautiful ladies here this afternoon, I would like to share a cheer for you. So if I could get Nathan to roll some footage, we'll watch it real quick.
One, a two, a three. Go back, go back, go back into the woods. You haven't got the goods. You haven't got the rhythm, and you haven't got the jazz. You haven't got the team that Springdale has.
Isn't that cute?
Oh, I love it.
I really looked up to them, you know, Fay Marie and Earlene were just enough older.
That is absolutely fun. I love your spirit, your bulldog spirit. Who was the other lady?
And shoemate,
Ann Shoemate.
yes.
Well, I caught these ladies doing their cheer. It was like a Springdale cheerleading reunion, and every decade, age group was represented, and you had those cute bulldog T-shirts printed up for all the visitors.
Yes.
And I just caught them in the lobby, and I had to film them doing their cheer. But that speaks to the Springdale spirit in many aspects. But of course, the big rival football game always was with Fayetteville.
Purple dogs.
Purple Dogs, Springdale Red Dogs, Fayetteville Purple Dogs. And not being a native, I always thought, well, that's silly. They're too close together. Why are they both bulldogs? And in visiting with Fay Marie, I got my answer. So Fay Marie, why don't you tell us the bulldog story?
All right, now I'm not sure this is true, but this came from a man associated with athletics in Northwest Arkansas. Fayetteville chose the bulldog. Theirs is purple. Springdale has the red bulldog. And so they went on like that for years as rivals. And then one year they decided that they would play, they'd have a game, and whoever won that game could claim exclusive rights to the Bulldogs, and they tied. So after that, they both kept claiming the Bulldog mascot, even to this day.
And so there you have it. I love it.
I didn't know that.
Well, we don't know if it's true or not, but I think we'll just go with that story. It sounds pretty
I
good.
can remember playing Fayetteville when I was in high school, and each Friday, maybe we had a special theme going, I don't know, but I can remember playing Fayetteville, and we would all wear a silly tag and that said, if we can't beat them, we'll scare them to death. And we dressed real stupid.
I love that. Well, there obviously were several games. I'm sure you all cheered your team on to the best of your ability and then retreated to Springdale if it was a Fayetteville game, or stayed in Springdale and celebrated afterwards. Did any of you have football boyfriends? Sure?
I didn't.
Yeah. An interesting point with Susan, she loves her hometown of Springdale, but she fell in love with somebody that wasn't from Springdale, right?
Yes, met him at Mount Sequoia at church camp, and I was 14 and he was 16. And his mother said, you don't need to think you're going to be going to Springdale every Saturday night. And he did.
And he did. Jim was from Prairie Grove, right? Yeah. Well, Prairie Grove's just a little hop down the road. So I thought that was a sweet story. Well, I want to switch gears just a little bit. There's so many wonderful memories about Springdale, and just like all of us when we're young, we just envision our childhood memories and our youth memories of the way things were. And then once you become an adult and you're stressed all the time, you wish for those good old days, and then you realize how fast things change. The older you get, the faster they change, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And one thing that is very notable are the changes in Northwest Arkansas with the growth, the population influx we've had, but particularly in Springdale. And so what I want to visit right now with you about is the diversity of Springdale. And someone called it the complexion of Springdale, and I think that's very appropriate too. But I learned a story from Susan when she had a part-time job at Dwight's with some of the first immigrants. Now, I will tell you, I did a little quick research this afternoon, and I found out who the first immigrant was to the Springdale, Northwest Arkansas area. It was, let's see, DeSoto.
You went way back.
He went way back. So he actually was the first immigrant. But Susan, tell us your story about your first realization that the complexion of Springdale was growing.
Well, when I worked at Dwight's, this family would come in. At Dwight's, we sold men's and women's clothing. Gaye's mom worked there part of the time too, yeah. And the Japanese people came in. Gaye told me they were Japanese. I just knew they were Asian. And they were chicken sexers. They worked for Tyson's. And evidently that's a career that's passed down from generations. I'm not sure it's something you can learn easily. But anyway, that was my first experience with them. Nice families.
Real
So
kind
they were
people.
here working for the poultry companies and how to sex chickens. That's interesting. And then later, as there were several stories you shared with me about migrant workers, mostly Caucasian, but not from the area. Tell me a little bit about that, Gaye. What do you remember?
Yes, I do remember. It was called the Migrant Camp over in the kind of the east, where Applegate Center is now. And Earlene's mother was
On
real.
Park Street, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Earlene's mother was one that started a group, and I was part of that, to go out there in the summer and have kind of a little vacation Bible school for those children. And their living conditions there were not good. And these children, if they came in the spring, they'd go to school for a little while, and then they would be moving on to the next crop, somewhere else. They were truly migrants. They just rotated around different places depending on the crops and the season. But yeah, and I don't know how many years they were there. And it's like the chicken sectors, they lost their career when machines started doing that. That's when we kind of lost that group.
Well, Gaye, didn't those mothers and fathers who worked out in the fields and agriculture fields, apples or peaches or something, didn't they take those children with them during the day?
Yeah, they didn't have.
They didn't have babysitters, so they took their children with them all day long while they worked in
They all worked,
agriculture.
the kids that were big enough helped pick those blueberries or apples or whatever.
Absolutely. Or grapes or whatever.
Lots of grapes back then,
Well, and speaking of grapes,
Yeah.
talk about Welch's.
Yeah, I lived near that plant, of course, when I was really little, but the whole town smelled like grape juice, Welch's grape juice. It was a big company for a very long time. And of course, most of those Concord grapes were grown in Tawnytown. Of course, we'll talk about that too when they were consolidated into Springdale schools. But it was there for quite a long time until the grape crops kind of dwindled and then they moved. But I think the grapes were still shipped to Welch's from Springdale, maybe by the train. I don't know how they got
But
there.
I think there was a train track right by the Welch's.
Yes, exactly. It was right by the
Yeah.
tracks. Right by the
I
tracks.
worked at Welch's in the lab one summer.
Oh,
And then also, when they would bring fruit in, they would line up on Emma Avenue, and then they'd go down, I guess, at Spring Street, and then they'd go back to where Welch's plant was. It was a big deal for Springdale.
well, and a lot of the grapes, as you said, were grown in Tawnytown. And what that brings us now to is talk about the Italians of Tawnytown and this consolidation of schools. And they came to Springdale, but then they would ride the bus. They did not have the luxury of walking to school so much. But then that community merged with Springdale.
And at the high school level, for quite a while, they kept their school out there, grades 1 through 8, but they started sending the high school kids in. And you're right, their only transportation was the school bus, and those young people came very involved in school. They were cheerleaders, they played football and all that. So pretty much, I had a really good friend from Tawnytown, and lots of nights she spent the night with us because after a game, she didn't have any way to get home until somebody could come get her.
Well, and of course, I'm sure you and your families all enjoyed going to Mary Maestry's for a
Yes.
delicious homemade
Absolutely.
Italian dinner. Earlene, what are some memories of Mary Maestry's?
Oh, I love Mary Maestry's. I was just thinking about the Tawnytown, what was it,
Grape Festival.
The Grape
Grape
Festival.
Festival.
the Grape Festival. And
Canceled this year.
one time my husband said, now children, we're not gonna be able to take a vacation this year. I'm sorry, but we can't afford to go. So my little one spoke up and she says, you mean we can't go to the Grape Festival?
That was a highlight of August, in August.
Well, and I also learned that the Grape Festival was held on Emma Street in Springdale one year.
Really?
Ah,
Oh, I
I
don't
didn't
remember
know
that.
that.
But it
that.
only lasted 1 year, and they moved it back to
Town.
Tommytown.
That's where it should have been. Yeah.
Right. And I think they're in their 112th or 13th year of that traditional festival, which is still fun. I mean, it's all about chicken and spaghetti
Yeah.
and
those women,
Carnival
everything's
rides.
homemade.
everything's homemade.
Everything's homemade. They make all that
Absolutely.
pasta and that sauce.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, as we move forward, we all understand that the poultry industries continue to grow, which was making the county rich and wealthy and providing a lot of jobs, but it was growing so fast that there weren't enough workers that lived in the area to work.
Right.
And many people know that Don Tyson made the decision to bring some immigrants in, and mostly Latinos, to do labor work. And from there, it has grown, and we understand that. There have been several Latinos that have now called Springdale and Northwest Arkansas home. And I think that there's about a population of, I think it's like 30%,
Something like that.
something
Really?
like that. And they work. They're extremely dedicated workers and provide the food that feeds Northwest Arkansas and America. And then as we move on, we all are aware of the new Marshallese population. I say new, they started moving to Northwest Arkansas probably about 2000, 2005, and they have a consul in Springdale. So what are some of the experiences you've had with any of these new residents of Northwest Arkansas and Springdale? Anything particular that sticks out in your mind? I mean, we know the Mexican or Hispanic restaurants are delicious. Everybody loves to go for Taco Tuesday.
One of the things I think one of the first things that they brought in were the chicken sexers.
Yeah, chicken sexters, they had that ability.
That was really, they seemed to be able to do that.
Those
And
are
that's the Japanese are
Japanese
the
did
ones that started doing that, and
Yeah.
Susan remembers meeting them.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting.
Because of these other groups of people, Riki, that has made a big influx into Springdale's school system.
Right.
And that makes Springdale the largest school system in Arkansas.
Absolutely. Wonderful school system. And they just continue to grow, and they have to keep up with the population and build schools. I know that you all attended Springdale High School, and it was about 2014, they built Harbor High School.
Yes.
And that was driven by the population. And they're somewhat rivals, maybe. I'm not really 100% sure, but
They are, yeah.
yeah.
Both great schools. Yeah, they really are.
Well, even before the immigrants came, the schools, the area was growing so fast that they couldn't build schools fast enough. I was a first grade teacher in Springdale, and I had 40 5- and 6-year-olds in my class. That's not allowed today. You have 20, back, but that's just the way it was. There weren't enough schools to hold everybody.
Did you work in Springdale? Once you got out of high school, did you stay in Springdale and work?
Well, I stayed. My husband was in law school, so I taught my first year at Washington Elementary in Fayetteville. We lived by that school. And then later I taught in Springdale and directed a private kindergarten because there weren't any in the public schools.
Marilyn, after you graduated from high school, where did your life turn?
I went to Ouachita Baptist University, but I would come home during the summer, and I was fortunate enough to work in one of the processing plants, the one that's now George's, back across the street from the AQ. Back then, it was Springdale Farms, and so I worked during the summer. I didn't get to pluck the chickens, thank goodness, but I worked on the line where we cryovac them and weighed them to go to the supermarkets to the harps and wherever. So I got to do that. And it was an experience. It was definitely an education.
Well, you've all received your education, I believe, from Susan. Where did you go to school?
I started at Tech and then I went to the university.
University and Washita and Gaye?
University of Arkansas.
I
University.
went to university.
Arkansas, 5 years. I got my master's
That's wonderful. And what was your master's in?
education.
Education. All right. Well, ladies, I just want to give you the opportunity to give us any more thoughts on Springdale and
Riki, I have something I meant to tell you the other
Please.
day and I forgot. When I don't know, it was probably grade school or upper grade school or junior high, there was a little city bus that went from Fayetteville Square to Springdale, the corner of Holcomb and Emma, every hour. And it would stop along the way and pick you up or let you off. And my sister and I, like I say, I lived one house off from Emma. We would stand down there, the little bus would pick us up, bring us to Fayetteville, and let us off down in the valley there, and we went swimming. Because I was in high school before Murphy Park came around, and we had a swimming pool. Anyway, that little bus was just amazing. If we needed to go shopping one day down in the square in Fayetteville, we could ride that bus.
It was called, when I was there, it
Remember
was
that.
called the Short Way. You just call the Short Way. It was kind of like Ozark Regional Transit, only then it went all the way, I know it went to Lowell. I don't know if it went to Rogers, because I would ride it to Lowell to see some relatives. But yes, we get together and go get off on College Avenue and walk down to the Fayetteville swimming pool. It was a big deal.
I don't remember that. I'm learning a lot today.
Yeah.
Springdale didn't have a swimming pool. Fayetteville had a swimming pool, and then we used to go to a pool up near Rogers called Willola.
At
That was-
Willola.
That was our big deal.
Yeah.
ah,
We'd have to have our parents
Oh, I
take us
went
up
to Lake
there.
Atlanta.
Yep, we
Well,
did.
Montague was before Lake Atlanta.
Yeah.
And it was ice water. It was fed by a spring.
It was ice
You
water. I
turned blue,
remember
but we
that.
didn't care. We'd just jump in and swim, didn't we? Yeah.
And they had a cabin up there, and we would go up there and spend 2 or 3 nights with our parents as chaperones. That was a big deal, but boy, that water was cold.
oh my
Girl
goodness.
Scout camps were there too. Yeah, Girl Scout camps at Montague in those cabins. Yeah.
Well, those are some wonderful memories, and I appreciate you sharing these so much. I've learned a lot about the community of Springdale. And the one thing that I can be assured about is that it's still a great community. There are people that genuinely care about Springdale. And although you've made the decision to live in Fayetteville, which we are totally proud of, I know you're going to always call Springdale home. And I think that's wonderful. There's, like I said earlier, there are several residents who lived in Springdale for most of their life. And one of them that I hope to interview soon, who will be a centenarian, and that is Wilma Samuels.
Yes.
And I cannot wait to visit with her. And I did not realize she had been in Springdale that long when I was organizing this group. But I have been told, without a doubt, she knows more about Springdale than anybody. And so I can't
Absolutely
wait
does.
to visit with Miss Wilma. And she has a lot to tell about the First National Bank, which is located on Emma.
I thought, was she at the First National or
She
First
was
State?
First State.
First State Bank.
First State
She was.
Bank. Oh,
Yeah.
pardon me. No,
Yeah.
okay, First State Bank. But it sounds like she kept a lot of people in line in Springdale as well.
That's right.
But I just want to thank you all for being here today, and just have a wonderful day. And thank you all so much for tuning in today. We appreciate it. Our next resident interview will be a little surprise. His name is Art Gust, and he'll be rolling out an announcement for the residents of Butterfield. So I'm very excited to be interviewing him. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Riki.